All right. Here we go.
Hello.
Hello.
I was still looking at the little the notification to see if it was on or not. It took me a bit.
I have stopped waiting for it to completely load on the Facebook page, because what I found is I'm sitting there making a dumb face while we're live and it says we're still loading, but we're not. So
Yeah.
So hello. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to get us streaming on all of our pages here. Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday. And it's a long weekend too. I had no idea it was Memorial Day on Monday.
I know. I have been really bad about holiday weekends ever since I stopped working like a W-2 job.
Yeah.
I just don't even recall anymore that there are holidays going on. So yeah, and then with all the other stuff that's been going on with working from home and things like that, it's even more to forget about. Because, like, I don't know, I guess you don't have the day off if you're working from home.
Or if you own your own business, you're like, what's that?
Right. We're gonna be doing stuff regardless, right? In fact, I don't know about you, but I found that on the days where things like the banks and the title companies are closed, if you're not getting a bunch of phone calls and having to handle a bunch of business with all of that stuff, then you take that time to work on other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So taxes still me. Taxes.
Yes, business taxes are, I have to do corrective taxes this year. So anyone new who's watching who is either just starting out in business ownership or real estate, or is interested in doing so, taxes are fun. Not really.
I know. I'm like, oh my God, when is this gonna end? And then I don't help it either, because systems, right? That's a whole other conversation for another time, which would be good to talk about also.
Yeah, we will certainly cover that at some point.
Yeah.
That I know. Sweet. All right. Well, today we said that we were going to talk about why sellers need investors. And I think this is actually a really important topic. And I think this is an important topic for everybody, for the people who are interested in real estate investing. And this is anybody, like, even if you want investing to be like kind of your side hustle, like if you have a really good full-time job that you like, but you want to do something extra to boost your, say, retirement income. So maybe you just want to have a few rentals or something like that. From that spectrum all the way to people who want to do this full time. And then even flip it on the other side, and from the perspective of, should you ever find yourself in a position where you have a property that you have issues with and you need to get rid of, and it's not good for a traditional sale. And we'll go over why that might be the case.
Right.
But I think this is relevant to so many different people, because these are situations that can come up in life for anyone. And so on the business side, if you understand how you can be of value, that's really, really important. And then on the, what we call in business, the disposition side. So if you are looking to offload a property for one reason or another, understanding who might be the best person to go to is also helpful. So so that's what we're going to talk about today. So do you have some beginning thoughts, Ange, that you'd like to get out there?
I think the initial thought that an advocate for investors is that investors are not bad people, and they're not sharks. I mean, there are a few people that, like with anything, will give kind of a bad reputation, or a bad name to investors, but for the most part, everybody out there is truly working for the seller for a win-win on both sides.
Yeah.
So investors are not bad people. If anything, we just want to help.
Right. Right. And just like any other industry, right, so you have companies out there, what legit companies, right? And some companies function better than others. Some companies are managed better than others. Like, you find the same thing in business ownership when it comes down to investing too, right? So, I mean, you're going to find investors that are really, really amazing at what they do. And you're going to find investors that have real specific niches, just like companies do. And then, yeah, are you going to find investors that behave like sharks and that do things that are untrustworthy? You will, because you're going to find that in any area of business regardless. So I agree with you. The idea that the real estate investing business is inherently somehow negative or a place for people to take advantage of other people, I disagree with as well. It's a spectrum just like everything else. But
yes,
we are definitely here to explain why the investing business model specifically can help people in ways that maybe traditional real estate isn't able to. And that serves a really important purpose.
Absolutely, because we can do, it gets a little more creative, and again, it's the win-win side of things, where we want to make sure that whatever we come up with, obviously with working with title and attorneys should that be needed, as long as it's legal, then you can do it.
Right.
And the fact that that environment is more, it lends itself to creative acquisitions, and for us to be able to sit with a seller, and if it's something that's really, really complicated or cumbersome, that there's still a way to do something.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So I made a little list before this of specific like situations where an investor might be an appropriate person to talk to from a seller's perspective, if there are these particular needs. So maybe you and I can just talk about these a little bit. So the first thing that I came up with was time sensitivity.
Yes.
Right? So time sensitivity is huge, because you and I have both been in situations where we're speaking to someone. Usually the time sensitivity is foreclosure, right?
Yes.
There are other things that can happen that are circumstances to the seller where they may have some time sensitivities happening, something in their life. But typically what we deal with around time sensitivity is a foreclosure. And that being the case, it is not always beneficial to a seller to try to do a traditional real estate transaction, right? And I think we've both had the conversation with sellers where they're trying to make a decision. They know how much time they have, and they're trying to decide, do I put this property on the market and see if I can beat the clock? Or do I work with an investor that can close quickly? And like, what are the pros and cons of that?
Right. And that can actually help me, even if you still need a little bit of time, we kind of know the steps to,
Right.
We don't kind of, we know the steps to take in order to get a few days added or plead with the right people, and get that in motion. I mean, it happened today. You know, my morning started with, of course, we've been working with this seller for a little while, and it's been wishy-washy, right? We don't know if we're gonna, yes, I want to sell it, but there's so much going on, and he's actually the representative for the estate. And when that happens, and there's no real motivation, they tend to just kind of lag. So now, you know, we're here in foreclosures next week, and of course we're like 7 a.m. I know Texas opens at 8 a.m. probably, their trustees. So I'm on the phone at 7 a.m. calling and trying to get a hold of somebody to see if, okay, what do I need, or how do I go about this? We need a few more days. We're gonna buy it. But, you know, so that time sensitivity, we get it, and we work with. It's a go kind of thing, but we make it happen. So I'm thankful for, I would be thankful for me, just saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I know it's not always a popular opinion to say, you know, if you need to sell quickly, if you're under time sensitivity, you should probably work with an investor versus a real estate agent. I know that people in our industry tend to get very upset or very defensive about that. But I have to say that in my experience, and I've seen it, not only have I seen it firsthand with my potential sellers that I speak to, but I've seen it through you. I've seen it through other colleagues where someone is in that predicament. They know that they're in foreclosure. They have the auction date there and they're trying to decide what to do. And maybe they're talking to a handful of different people to see who might be the, you know, best option to go with. And the folks that I have seen go with real estate agents, I have to say that a really high percentage of the time, like well over 90% of the time, the agent typically cannot get the house sold prior to the foreclosure. And
Right.
that's for a whole bunch of different reasons. And there are some things, there are some like details that people don't understand. So one of the things that people, even some agents don't know, is that if a property is in foreclosure and you've got a traditional buyer that it has come in, say the house is pristine, it's in great condition and they don't need to do anything to it. So you did find a buyer that really wants it. Well, that's great. However, that buyer now has to go through the qualification process with their lender. And depending on who their lender is and what the underwriters are looking at, if they see that the property is in foreclosure and maybe there are other title issues happening, that could be a red flag for that lender, you know?
Yes.
And so if the lender says, we're not going to approve this, and now you've gone through several weeks of getting the property contracted, allowing the buyer to do all of their due diligence, and
Mm-hmm.
now they're working with their lender and their lender says, no, I don't think so. This is a risk. So we're not going to lend on this property. And then it falls out of escrow because they've rescinded their offer. You have to start over again. What if you don't have time to start over again? We've seen that happen. You know,
Yeah. And it's
um,
scary because the closer you get, it's the more angst, and everybody starts to get really anxious and, you know, kind of
absolutely.
angry about the whole thing. So it just makes for really just all kinds of unpleasantries. Like, it's
Yeah.
just not good.
And often it's not communicated what the problem was, why the property fell out of escrow. But that's one of the things that happens fairly regularly with properties
Yeah.
like this. And then, you know, another difficulty that happens. Okay, so now you've gone through several weeks, and maybe you had say 8 weeks or 12 weeks, and now you've blown through 4 weeks and it's fallen out of escrow. So now the property needs to be marketed again. But this can happen over again because if a traditional lender is seeing a red flag and the seller isn't being told what the red flag is so that they have some opportunity to try to fix it to get the traditional sale to come through,
Right.
that's just going to keep happening potentially until they lose the property. And if the
Mm-hmm.
real estate agent isn't educated in that, they're not going to be able to communicate what in the world is going on. So people can inadvertently lose their property thinking that all they had to do was put it on the market.
Yeah.
So that can be a problem. The other thing that could be a problem is sometimes agents feel strongly that they can get a postponement from the trustee, right? Because we've been through
Right.
this before. Now we've gotten lots of postponements from trustees, but trustees usually ask us for proof of funds. They want to know that it's a cash purchase and they want to know how quickly we're going to close.
Yeah. If we're
And
serious. Yep.
that's not to say that a traditional buyer isn't serious, but the problem is that if they're not purchasing with cash, everything is up to the lender and their underwriters. So once a trustee starts saying, do you have proof of funds? Do you have this? Do you have that? And this is the thing too, like a traditional buyer can do an oopsie. Like, I don't know how many people watching have bought a house, but when you buy a house, one of the things that they tell you is when you're in escrow, don't make any big purchases. Don't buy furniture. Don't go try to get a new car. Don't start picking out patio furniture and pool stuff
Right.
and open up credit cards, because when you do that, the lenders, they're watching your every move, right? And if they're like, this
Yeah.
person is being irresponsible, they can choose not to follow through with approving your loan. And if that happens, you don't get the house. Now,
Yeah,
trustees
exactly.
know this because they know the real estate business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when a trustee understands that and they go, this is a traditional buyer, how do I know that the buyer isn't going to go buy $3,000 worth of furniture and then it's going to fall out of escrow and then we're not going to be able to foreclose because we went ahead and gave a postponement and now we're stuck. Now,
Yeah.
if you're dealing with an investor who's buying cash and you give them a statement, a proof of funds letter that shows you have that cash available immediately and you can close right away, that trustee is way more likely to say, okay, we'll give you 7 days to get everything together paperwork wise so that you can make this happen.
Right. Exactly. And I think cash is key in this situation, just because people want to see that you have money to be able to do this. And I'm sorry, but yeah, cash is king when it comes to this kind of situation. Absolutely. If I was a trustee, just how you explained it, I wouldn't. A traditional sale, I'm gonna have to wait 3 months or whatever it is that you have to wait. So no, I
Right.
want it to be done and move on to the next property or the next issue that that they're working on. There's
Right.
like a million foreclosures. They're not just dealing with one. So the faster that they can get through it, the better for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they've got an entire business riding on that as well. So they're not just going to willy nilly give out postponements all over the place. So
Right.
it's not as easy to get a postponement granted as people think it is, you know. And the other part to that that's unfortunate is what can sometimes happen is if you have someone who's been in and out of the foreclosure process a number of times, you know, so maybe they've been having financial issues for a couple of years and they've
Hmm.
fallen into foreclosure and then they asked for a reinstatement because they were able to kind of move some things around financially and save it. If they've done that 2 or 3 or 4 times already, if you keep asking for postponements after someone's been back and forth, at some point the trustee is going to go, no, we've
Yeah.
already given this many opportunities to fix this. So we're not going to continue to do that over and over again.
Well,
So,
no, it's like crying wolf. So they don't, think you're full of shit. So it's like it's a,
right.
you do it or you don't.
Yeah.
So I like it when we do get a seller where they really haven't reached out to the bank yet and they kind of
Yes.
it's still fresh. It's clean. So it's a lot easier to talk to the trustee and there's so much more. I have to say though, there are some trustees out there that are really horrible to work with.
Yeah.
Whereas there are some others that really do lend themselves and they give you all of the information and exactly what you need to do, because you're trying to make this happen, so they understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, yeah, when you mess around with them, after a while, they're like, I mean, they're like they're a debt collector,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. You're only going to get so many opportunities. Unfortunately, that's the way that it works. And
Yeah.
so, you know, with investors, the other thing is when you're an investor and you frequently purchase foreclosure properties, there are some trustees, because like there's only a handful of trustees, for example, in our state, right, that handle the majority of the foreclosures. There aren't really endless trustees out there. So if you buy a lot of foreclosures like we do, you end up building up a relationship with some trustees. And
Yeah.
so, if you're talking with a seller and you see who it is that's the trustee of their foreclosure, and we have a relationship with these people, then that means you're far more likely because, right, we've built up the reputation that when we call and ask for a postponement and say we're going to close on it by XYZ date, we close on it. And they know because we've proven that to them over and over.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if you have that relationship, they're far more likely to say, well, you haven't let us down before. And we understand that you've closed on every property that you've asked us to grant an extension on. So they're
Yeah.
far more likely to work with you in that case, where if they get a phone call from some random agent that they've never worked with before asking for a postponement without giving the evidence that the trustee wants to hear that makes them sound secure, they're probably not going to
Mhm.
grant that postponement. I mean,
Yeah.
because legally they don't have to. They're not
Yeah.
obligated to.
Yeah, but I feel like that the more transparent you are and the more you kind of loop them into the communication with the title company, yourself, the seller, like everybody's kind of working for the same goal, that
Yes.
they're much more open to kind of to lending themselves to make everything work. Um, it's interesting when they don't want to, and it's probably because the seller has not been completely truthful with you. And so they've done some things already that's pissed off the trustees. So when you do end up talking to them, they don't want to work with you anymore because they're just done at that point.
Yeah.
But it goes to show you, like, the investor, us, we basically go to bat for the seller regardless of what's happening. And sometimes it can be horrible situation, and the seller could have screwed up completely with the trustee, a couple of days before, but here we are, showing face and
Right.
trying to fix it. Which I think it says a lot for the person that stands up for the seller and advocates for them, basically, to be able to come to a happy overall conclusion.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because when the seller has made some attempts maybe to handle some things on their own prior to working with someone else to get out of the situation, because this is not something that typically a lot of sellers are educated on or know what to do, and because they can tend to be emotional about it, maybe they called up the trustee in a moment of frustration and said some things they shouldn't have said, and then we have to come in behind and fix that. So there's a lot of experiential kind of things that occur here that can really benefit working with an investor if you happen to be in a really time sensitive situation, and at this point you're trying to do a last ditch effort to not lose the property and to sell it instead
And do something.
Yeah.
Yes. Because no matter what, just don't walk away. Like, just don't walk away.
Yeah, it's really not the best idea. I mean, unless there is a situation so absolutely complicated and convoluted that there is no way to problem solve, which is pretty rare, I have to say. Walking away from the property doesn't really do you any good, because it's going to affect your credit most likely. And there's a huge snowball effect that happens financially. It's not like just walking away from paying a credit card. It's a very different, there's different ramifications there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So the second thing that I have on my list is subject matter expertise. And so I find that this has been probably the biggest, the biggest sort of boost to my business is having subject matter expertise. So I really like judicial foreclosures. I have a lot of subject matter expertise in judicial foreclosures. And what I have found is oftentimes sellers not only do they not understand how judicial foreclosure itself works, but they don't really understand how the judicial system itself works.
Right.
And so being able to educate people that find themselves in that situation, whether or not they sell the property to you, is huge. I don't know how many phone calls and text messages I've gotten from potential sellers that I've spoken to that have actually been able to save their property, that they didn't sell it to me, that they were able to get out of the judicial foreclosure once they understood what was going on. And that's just as much of a win-win too, because if they were really happy with the information that I gave them, and it turns out that one of their neighbors or one of their friends finds themselves in a similar situation, they can go tell that person that I was helpful and they can refer me, and that's a really big deal. And I know that you've been in that situation as well. And then you have a unique sort of niche in the business, because since you're bilingual, you get to speak to the Spanish speaking community who may have even less access to information with more complex things like this than your typical seller does.
Yeah, most definitely. I feel it almost, when I first started, it felt like that was a big responsibility for me, because a lot of my sellers were Spanish speaking.
Mhm.
And I was learning as I was going as well. So kind of just hand in hand teaching them what I was learning, and it just kind of really, really I absorbed everything as quickly as possible. But it does, you have to be able to speak to what is happening um, currently. And and in all honesty, I mean, I feel like with some of the Spanish folks, because the information is available, and so, and it is more available now, I should say that. There are a lot of other folks that I've been able to work with that do speak Spanish that happen to work for the trustees or the bank, that sort of thing. Um, but in the when I a few years back, it almost felt like there was really nobody around that could translate some of these really complicated situations. I and like I said, I felt really responsible that I had to learn as much as I can as quickly as possible so
Mhm.
that I would be able to give that information to them, because even with a language barrier, you feel really alone. Like you
Yeah.
feel like there's nobody, who's going to help you, or how are you going to get through this.
Right.
But there's always a way. There's always a solution. I think that's what we always say. There's always a solution, no matter what the problem is. But definitely, and I want to suggest this to some of the folks that want to do investing and they have a second language. Use it. There's so
Absolutely.
many people out there that need help, but they're embarrassed because they don't want to admit that there is a language barrier.
Yeah.
Because it's not only Spanish folks, speaking folks. There's a lot of different communities that we have, particularly here in the Valley, um, that are in need of that kind of help.
Absolutely. I've worked with a good handful of foreign investors, and one of the things that is what I didn't realize, because I've only lived in the United States, but something else besides the language barrier that can get in the way is there are foreign investors who don't understand U.S. property taxes, because in other countries, sometimes when you purchase a property, you own that property and you own that land, and that's it. Once you purchase it, it's done, it's yours forever. And that's
Right.
just the way it works. There are other countries that don't have property taxes and they don't have other things that you have to pay for. And so I've run across a number of rental properties that end up in tax foreclosure, property tax foreclosure, and they are owned by foreign investors. And what I learned quickly was that, when I would get in touch with these people, so first of all, the first thing they think is that it's a scam when I try to contact them.
Yeah.
Because in their experience, because their country doesn't run the same way that ours does, they're going, I own that property outright. I don't need to pay anything else on it. This must be a scam.
Hmm.
And you have to get through that. If there's a language barrier on top of it, that makes it even more challenging. But I mean, that's part of it. Not everybody understands how those things work here. And we're in this hot Phoenix real estate market where people in other places see the growth that we're going to have here and they want to invest here, but it doesn't mean that they know every single little detail if they're not from the United States about
Yeah.
investing. So
Exactly.
yeah, so those things occur more frequently than you would think. And if you have
Yeah.
expertise in that area, you're in a position to help.
Absolutely. And it almost, I don't know, but then I think this is just more because of who I am. I feel like, why wouldn't you want to help?
Right.
Um, so, but I understand. I mean, there's some people that are not, I mean, that's not what they want to do their investing in or put their time into when they do investing. But that is a huge, huge help. And there's not a lot of it. So people that are bilingual, that know and can do this and relate to people are really needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And my opinion is, if you're interested in being a real estate investor, the more knowledge that you can accumulate in specific niches or specific subject matter, the better an investor you're going to be. Because we've come across other investors that had people under contract that were in judicial foreclosure, and they let it go because they didn't understand how to clear judicial foreclosure. They didn't know how to
Mhm.
deal with the title issues. They didn't know how to get payoffs. They didn't, they didn't know how to do those things. And because they didn't know how to do it, their assumption was, I can't do anything with this property. So now that negatively affects the seller, because the seller is going, well, you said you were going to help me, and now you're saying there's no way to do this. And it negatively affects you in your business, because if it's just something that you don't know how to do, and you didn't put any effort to learn how to do that, you just said, I don't want this property because it's hard, you're not doing yourself any favors in business.
No.
So like I said, I love judicial foreclosures because I know a lot of the ins and outs about them. I can be really helpful to my sellers, and because I'm giving them really good information, even if at the very beginning they're like, yeah, I think I can fix this and I don't want to sell the property. Sometimes they change their mind. I had a guy up in Peoria he was a truck driver. And for the longest time, I actually thought that the property was vacant because I was never able to catch anyone there when I would go, door knock it. And eventually, I think it took like 4 or 5 months. Eventually, I happened to catch the guy on his day off. And he was there, and he said, oh, I've been getting the letters that you're sending, and I don't understand what's going on. So in this case, his HOA was foreclosing him. And the thing that happened that he didn't realize was that he had his HOA payment on auto pay. And because he was a truck driver, he was telling me he's only home like 1 or 2 days a week, maybe. And a long while before this all started, the HOA had changed up their payment portal. And so they required everyone to, fill out new paperwork and do a new payment portal. Well, he didn't check his mail, that frequently, being that he was out on the road all the time. And when he would get offers from the HOA, he wasn't thinking it was anything that was earth-shatteringly important. So he just ignored it because he didn't think that it was anything important. So he thinks that he's paying every month. Well, guess what? At some point, those payments stopped going through when they changed the portal. And all of a sudden he's like, what? I'm behind all this money and they're foreclosing me? What is going on? So I was able to explain to him what happened. I was able to actually find out, I went in and I printed out all of the legal paperwork for him to see because it's public record. And I gave him all the information and he said, okay, I think I can fix this. And then when he actually spoke with the HOA attorney, it happened to be one of the more difficult HOA attorneys in town. And they were not willing to work with him on the terms that he wanted. So he came back to me and he said, you know what, I don't even want to live in this neighborhood anymore because they're just making my life difficult and I don't have time to go around and around. He's like, I got to go back to work. I think I would rather just cash out and go find a property that doesn't have an HOA so that I don't have to think about this. And then in addition, he was like, maybe I could find some place that has a little bit of land. I own my own truck for truck driving. I don't, I don't use the trucks for my company. And he's like, then I could just park my rig at my house. Cause he's like, right now I have to rent space to park my truck and then I have to commute and blah, blah, blah. And he had this whole thing. So when he considered all the pieces and how difficult it was going to be for him, because his time sensitivity was one, that the foreclosure was looming, the court case was ongoing regardless, right? So he had that to worry about. And then the other piece was he's on a very strict schedule. And so he's going, I don't want to take vacation time or something like that to have to deal with this. So you've made my life a lot easier. Can you just handle this for me? Yep. Absolutely. I'm happy to handle it for you. So it was a win-win. He'd owned the house for a while, so he made a nice profit. He was happy with it. He was able to go find himself another property somewhere where there was no HOA, where he didn't have to deal with this. He was able to move closer to where he needed to go to his work for distribution. Like all of these things ended up lining up for him, and he was so happy with the situation. And I ended up getting a great house that sold really fast. So everybody was happy. And, had he maybe tried to put that house on the market, one of the things that he mentioned to me was, I don't want to go through a real estate agent because he's like, I can't be responsible for showing the house. I can't come home to make sure that, the place stays in perfect, all of these things. He's like, I don't have time to do all of those things. That doesn't make any sense to me. So he was willing to give me a small discount so that he could, move on and get done what he wanted to get done, get out from under the lawsuit. and it was a win-win.
It's so much easier. It is so much easier. I mean, even when I had it reminded me of a client that we had uh, at Saha. It was property over in the like McDowell 32nd Street area. And I remember the young lady, she worked from home, but she just didn't want to, it was under foreclosure. The property had been in their family forever. Um, but she felt like she just wanted to move somewhere else and she wanted her kids to go to another school and that sort of thing. Um, and she almost, it was like she interviewed me, because it's funny because when you bring up the whole fact that some people don't have time, yet they still kind of want to do it on their own.
Yeah.
And she was like, I can't, I think I should talk to a realtor. And I told her, I was very honest about it. I said, this is what I do, or what an investor does. We come, we look at the property, we give you these numbers. Here you go. This is what we can offer. This is how because this is the end is for us to take over the property, rehab it, and then sell it. Right. So this is what we need to put into it. So I would, total transparency. This is what we're looking at. If you're going to work with, because she said, I have a couple of appointments with a couple of realtors. And I said, okay. And not that I mean, every realtor works a little bit differently, but basically, they come in, they'll tell you that this is what they can do. You'll put it on the market and you wait, like you said.
Yeah.
And then you have to do a lot of work because you have to make sure that the property is in good condition and it's like not staged, but it's nice and clean and presentable so that people can come in. And then, you wait and see, but there is no guarantee that they can sell this before the foreclosure date.
Right.
Totally prepped her. And I said, when you talk to these real estate agents, ask, what is my guarantee? What happens if you can't sell it? What happens if I'm not home and the place isn't like what? So I gave her all the questions to ask. And I said, in a week, you give me a call and let me know how it's going. If I don't hear from you, that means that you're good and you got it all handled. She called me like in 4 days. and she said, everything you told me happened. She said, everything you told me the realtor was going to say happened. She's like, I asked them the questions. They couldn't really answer. We set up, maybe we could put it on the market. She's like, she goes, this is too much work. And she goes, I don't want to deal with this. And she's like, it's good. I don't know what I need to sign, but if you can come over tomorrow, let's just get paperwork done and I'm done. I was like, I thought, if everybody could just see this, it would be so much easier. Yeah. People don't have time. And to be honest, like I think about it now, if I was to own another home right now, I don't own a home. If I was to own another home and I needed to just be done with it, yeah, an investor, quickly, easy, just, not a big deal, just do it. And we could be done.
Yeah. It so depends on your situation and what it is that you're trying to accomplish and what your needs are at the time. So this is just another option to go with, just like anything else. There are plenty of people. So this is one of the ways that I kind of think about it in my mind. There are plenty of people who, when they're ready to get a new car, there are those people who want to look at Kelley Blue Book and they want to post it on Craigslist and they want to sell it themselves because they want to collect all the money possible. And then there are the people that are like, I'm gonna drop the thing at the dealership and I don't care how much money they give me for it. I understand that they're going to give me a discounted, but I don't want to deal with all of it, right? And so those people are looking at the situation in two different ways based on what it is that they want for their end game, right? So it's the same thing with sellers of a property based on what it is that they're trying to accomplish or what they need to get done, what problem they need to get solved, who they decide that they're going to work with.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think actually that's a really good segue to another thing that I have on my list is what we tend to call unsellable houses. And so what I mean by unsellable houses are the properties that have badly deferred maintenance. And so it wouldn't even be appropriate for an end user buyer to purchase the property and be able to move right into it because so much work would have to be done before it's moving ready. Or maybe it's a situation where there's hoarding that's happening. And so the overwhelming idea of having to get that house cleared out in order to sell it traditionally is too much for the seller. And they can't handle it, because we come in, we'll buy properties like that, right? And we will clear the property out. We will handle that piece, because we understand that that seller might not be able to deal with that particular issue. Or maybe it's a property that has been vacant for a long time, and maybe someone inherited it. And, you know, we've seen every number of things. I mean, I've seen everything from inherited properties that look like a time capsule when you walk in because they just haven't been updated, but there's nothing really wrong with them, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where there's holes in the roof, there's pigeons and rodents living in it, and the place is nearly destroyed, because any number of things can happen when a property's been vacant for a long time. So, you know, and don't get me wrong, now there are people who will still put those properties on the MLS, right? And usually it's an investor that's going to buy it on the MLS. There's not typically an end user buyer that's going to go, yeah, I think I want to buy that pigeon infested property and I'm going to totally redo it on my own dime before I move in. That's very rare.
It is very rare. It just doesn't. And I don't think, and I think sometimes too, and again, I'm not a realtor, but I know that some of the realtors, they don't want to deal with that, you know?
No way.
No. I remember a property we had was like a hill of dead bees. A hill. It was like, it was horrible.
We couldn't figure out what it was at first. We're like, what is all that on the floor? Yeah.
It was awful. It was scary. Yeah. And I felt really bad for the bees as well, because I'm thinking, oh God, the whole ecosystem thing that I have. It is just, no, I mean, you could not put that on the MLS, or, you know, no. So yes, unsellable properties, granted, I think sometimes people, the owners, tend to think that there's so much more worth in the property that it should be on MLS, or they try to sell like MLS prices, I guess I would call it.
Yeah.
Because they feel like their property is worth that much, when in reality, no.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, and that is an issue, because when you're in the industry, you understand that the property is only worth so much based on condition, based on age, and that the land itself that it sits on isn't really worth that much. Some sellers misconstrue, and they think, they think that land is inherently worth a lot of money, and it's typically not. So yeah, those are definitely some hurdles. But I would argue that if you've got a property like that, and I guess it depends too on the seller's level of motivation. If you're okay with something sitting on the market for a long time, and you're okay with, having an agent show it and, and present you with maybe offers that you're not really happy with, that more money is going to come out of, because remember that if it's investors looking at it and then you've got to pay an agent on top of that, you're not capturing all the available money. If you work with an investor on your own without an agent, you get to capture the entire profit versus having middlemen that collect, and some people are okay with that because they just don't want to deal with it and they'd rather the agent do it. And I can understand that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But definitely, I mean, if you've got a property that's in that type of condition, there are investors out there that will work directly with you and make you a fair offer. And it's a win-win, because you get out from under a property that's going to be a ton of work to get livable again, which is usually not something that sellers want to have to worry about, getting all of that work done on their own. That's why we do this as a business. We've already set it up so that we can come in and do it easily.
Yeah, exactly. It's fun though. I think it's fun to look at the potential of a property. I think that's always
a lot of fun.
Most fun. Yeah.
It is. And it's, it's good for the neighborhoods as well, because especially if you have a property that happens to be like on a nice street or in a nice neighborhood, and for whatever reason, maybe that property's been vacant for a long time, and so it kind of becomes like the eyesore or the problem property. The neighbors are so pleased when you come in and
Absolutely.
fix it up and you get a family that wants to buy it, and live there, because it takes pressure off of the neighbors too. They're not worrying about what's going to happen to their value. They're not worrying about what's going to happen if squatters get in, those kinds of things. Because,
Stress.
yeah, that is a stressor, because squatters come into your neighborhood and all of a sudden it's not just the problem of that house, because it's going to be a problem for everybody in the neighborhood when that happens.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like, so it's funny when we talk about the neighborhoods, right? Because sometimes people are really rude to investors and they're just kind of like, they don't want to, they think we're just taking advantage of a family that's been there for years, right? And then there's other people that are just so thankful that, oh my God, thank God they're leaving, kind
Yeah.
of thing. But the two flips that we are in right now, I have to say both neighbors on for each property, and I should say one of the properties has two neighbors. They were happy that they're happy that we're there and that we're rehabbing this whole property, but they went in on the cost of the block wall that divided between them and their yards.
Wow.
Both of these yeah, so it's been really so people they want for their home to look good, and they want to have a good neighbor as well.
Yeah.
So when you build those relationships as you're there in the community and you're talking to the neighbors, they're more than willing to also chip in. I mean, why not? It helps their home value.
Absolutely.
Yeah, paying for half the block wall or a third of the block or whatever it is. Yeah, it makes a massive difference. I was really, really, really thankful and grateful that that they were willing to do that, because we didn't say anything. It was just almost like organically it happened. So it's good to do that.
Yeah, that's really, really nice. I
Mhm.
think that that's something that gets overlooked really frequently in our industry. That because it's a typical thing. Like people are loud when there are things that they don't like, right? They want to
Mhm.
tell everybody when something is wrong, but when something is pleasing to them, or when they're having a good experience with something, that doesn't necessarily always translate to them going around and telling everyone about it. But
Right.
we had we've had experiences in our business where the neighbors have been really pleased with what we've been able to do for any number of reasons. In fact, I can remember a property that Saha had under contract that had some squatters in it that knew a lot about squatters' rights, and they were particularly difficult to get out. And I remember going to see that property and the neighbors actually coming over and saying, "We are so grateful that you finally got those people out of here, because we know that there was drug activity going on. We called the police so many times and there was nothing the police could do. They couldn't get them out of our neighborhood." And this was like a neighborhood with families that a lot of them had like school age kids. And so the
Hmm.
last thing that they want is drug activity going on in their neighborhood where their kids, are hanging out in the cul-de-sac and playing after school, and they feel that it's dangerous.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I mean, we've got tricks up our sleeve to get people out of there that need to get out. That, when people understand squatters' rights, there's only so much the police can do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was the property where we stood in front of it and took a picture with a newspaper, right?
Yes.
I remember because the seller didn't really believe us.
Yep.
Yeah, and you had to take a picture of it
Yeah, and
with
I
a
think they were out of
with
town. I
a
think the seller lived out of town.
right. So it was a current newspaper or the day of newspaper, and we took a picture of. I remember that. Yeah, that was a creepy because it was the house at the end of the cul-de-sac
Yeah,
where like all traffic
yeah,
was diverted to have that going on in your neighborhood. Yeah, it makes it extremely uncomfortable and you don't feel safe. And that's the
right.
biggest thing about your home. You want to be safe. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, investors do a lot of things that benefit not just the seller, but benefit the whole neighborhood and the community. Um,
Hmm.
and so quickly, I want to go over the last thing that I have on my list, which is I think that this is pertinent. We have often we have information or we have access to information that the seller either doesn't know how to get or can't easily get or may not fully understand because it's more complicated on the industry side of things, right? So like a seller may not understand difficult title issues because if they're not buying and selling property all the time, where they're having a lot of experience with how you clear title, they might not understand enough about title to know why there's a particular problem and how to fix it, right? Or
Right.
if they find themselves, so I go back to something like a judicial foreclosure, or if there are liens against the property. I've come across a number of sellers where they had inherited properties and there were lots and lots of medical liens on the inherited properties because like
Mm-hmm.
we're in Phoenix, right? And so we have snowbirds, we have people who come here and retire and their families don't come with them. They come here maybe from a cold climate or whatever, and they purchase a property. And you know, once they get elderly, if they start having health issues and whatnot, now they're in a position where those liens are put against the property, and the family who lives back home gets notified way after the fact, after mom and dad have passed, you know,
Yeah.
that not only are there issues with the property itself, but now there's liens against it. And I've talked to so many of these people that go, there's, you know, $50,000 in medical liens and the property also is in disrepair. So there's nothing we can do. We're just going to let it go. Well, one of the things that they don't know is there are certain liens that can be negotiated.
Mm-hmm.
Not every lien that's against a property is that absolute number. And that's something that investors do know. So we're not afraid of medical liens because we know that we can negotiate those. And especially if we can prove that the property is in disrepair and the entity that has the liens understands that if this property goes to auction, they're not going to get their money, then they're more than willing to negotiate with you.
Absolutely. They want that's all it is. People want their cash.
Right.
Regardless of where it's coming from, you know, it's just one of those things where it's a debt and you owe it and just you pay it and you figure out how. And I have to say that most medical liens can be negotiated. There's always some, I mean, people are going to figure out how to make it work. You know, it's always, you know, the win-win situation too. Even federal tax liens. I remember when I did my first federal tax lien, although it seems like, oh my, like this monster of a thing. Yes, it is a little bit, you know, there's a lot of paperwork involved and a lot of phone calls. But once the IRS is they're not bad people either. Like
Right.
The people who work for the IRS are extremely helpful. And there's a ton of information. But I remember trying to figure out this federal tax lien for a person, you know, this gentleman who was not bilingual. He only really spoke Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so lost with the whole thing. I'm kind of glad that it happened this way because this is where I really learned how to kind of handle that whole situation. But it was fine. We went and we met up with the IRS agent here in town and we just talked about it, kind of cleared it all up, had the plan in place, and he was able to sell his property and he got a profit from his property. Like he didn't lose it all because of the federal tax lien. So
Right.
that, I think people get scared. They're just like, oh my God, it's a lien. I don't know, it's over. We can't do anything with it. No. There's ways to go ahead and talk to those folks, whether it be medical liens, you know, the federal tax stuff, of whatever other kind of liens there are, but there's ways to go around that or to negotiate. There's always a way.
100%. And I think that something that a seller may not be aware of, again, because they're not in the middle of this every day like we are for our business. One of the things that most people aren't aware of is that when a lien goes against a property, and this is especially true of something like a federal tax lien, the way that they decide the value of the property, they don't put a lot of time and effort into this at all. They're not going in and appraising the property and doing all of those things. They're looking at comps on a computer screen and they go, well, this must be what the property's worth. So this is what we're going to assume that we can get on our lien. But
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is that if you bring them information that contradicts what because they're making an assumption, right? And then they
Yeah.
turn around and then they do their due diligence and they go, oh, wow, you're right. This property isn't worth what we thought it was worth. Because I've had situations like that too. We also helped a lady with a federal tax lien. And they way overvalued the property because they literally just comped it online, and they never drove the neighborhood, and they never did like a formal appraisal until
Right.
we spoke to them. And then when they went and did the appraisal, they went, oh wow, this property is actually a
Yeah.
loss because it's in such bad
Right.
condition. And we're like, this is what
Yeah.
we're trying to tell you. But somebody needs to bring them that information in order for them to change the whole, outcome of what could potentially happen. And if you don't know how to do that, you're not going to be able to solve that problem. So
Yeah.
the fact that we know how to solve problems like that, that means that we're able to help people in a position, sellers who don't know how to solve those problems, and they may think that their only choice is to walk away from the property and just, take the loss. And that's not necessarily true.
No. Like we said, there's some sort of a solution. There's always or somebody has been through this already, that we can figure out the information and the next steps, set up the plan, and then and you run with it. Right. So yeah, no, there's always, and that's why I think with investors, you can get very creative, because it's what we do. I mean, we're going to try and figure out. I think we really kind of get jazzed up about it, that we like so much to deal with these kinds of situations, because we like figuring things out. It's like being some sort of a detective. You're just kind of doing and trying to figure out until you got the strategy, you know exactly what you're doing. Home run, you're good. Seller's happy, you're happy, and it's all good. So it's good, obviously, when it works like that. It's not always like that. There's been some.
It's not always that easy.
Yeah,
it's always that black and white. But if you have the foundation to start from, and that's the thing too, if you have access to somebody who does have that level of information, and they can, oftentimes they can take a look at what's going on with your property and say, yeah, this is solvable. It's gonna be a little bit complicated, but the problem can be solved. And I definitely think that if the problem can't be solved, probably those of us who've done all the complicated deals are the ones that could tell you with a little bit more accuracy, this doesn't look like it's something that can be, solved. Outside of consulting a real estate attorney, honestly, a real estate investor with a lot of experience and a lot of niche expertise is probably the best person to go to for complicated problems and see if they're solvable or not.
Yeah, exactly. And even that, I mean, we've had situations where we're like, oh my gosh, like this is going downhill real fast. Get an attorney. And we have people that we recommend, absolutely, because the biggest thing is, just trying to help the seller get to a place where they can actually do something. If we are not able to, then we need to refer you to somebody else, and we will.
Absolutely. And we have the resources to do that, because if it's a complicated real estate problem, you shouldn't just go hire any random attorney.
Right.
Because they need to have expertise in a particular area in order to help you with that. So, we can make those referrals. And I would say most real estate investors probably can. Any good investor who's been at it for any, reasonable amount of time likely has a real estate attorney on retainer that they consult frequently to ensure that they can, they have access to all the information that they need to run their business properly. So that's a fantastic resource to have as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So in closing, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that we learn in this business. There's a lot of information that we have available, both based on experience and based on resources and, networking with colleagues that are in other areas of real estate. And this helps us to have kind of a wide base or a wide foundation of knowledge for different, complicated problems. So I think what we want to get across is just that, investors are professional problem solvers. Many of us are here to help especially if it's a situation that people think that they don't know how to work their way out of. And we have expertise in areas that other real estate professionals might not, because if you're typical, so if you're an agent and what you're typically doing is working with traditional buyers on a daily basis to just sell their old home and find a new home, you don't really have the opportunity to gain the experience that we
Right.
have. So it's not that we're saying agents are bad on purpose or something like that. It's just that
Yeah, no.
when your experience for the way that you do your business doesn't lend itself to certain types of problem solving, and that doesn't mean that you don't want to help, but it might mean that you don't have the resources or the knowledge to do it.
Right. And there are some agents out there that know exactly what they're doing, and they know a ton.
Yeah.
And that are real estate investor friendly. And we know a lot of those folks too. I mean, I know that there's been situations where we we consult with them in regards to maybe finding a property for what seller that we have, that will need another property. So, or there's real estate agents that are or do some investing as well, or they know that realm really well. So it's just, I think sellers just have to kind of be a little bit more open-minded about what an investor can do versus what the real estate agent can do. We get a lot, there's a lot more freeway in the investing side of things, just because we're able to hit a lot of different things, and the different resources that we have.
Absolutely. So I think what it comes down to is, at the end of the day, being an informed consumer. When you have a problem that needs to be solved, kind of thinking about who are the different parties available that might be able to help solve this problem. And we hope to educate people that real estate investors are here to help solve complex problems. And we want to help to do away with that stigma that investors are just there to get a deep discount on your property for no reason. That's really not the way that most of us function.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So I know that I can say I've been really satisfied in my career with being able to help people, come to a win-win, or, when you get that difficult deal and you solve the problem that seems like, or when they say like, nobody's been able to fix this and figure it out, those deals always feel really good at the end, because, you feel like you made a big accomplishment. And that you've helped someone who is in, at least a frustrating situation, if not, something much more negative than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many where, oh my gosh, where you feel like, I don't even know how we're going to make this work, but we make it work. And it's just, it turns out okay. We have a few stories about that, and I'm sure we'll share them later on, but there's some people that I will never forget.
Yeah, me too. And from a business standpoint, you never get bored. When there's always a new problem to solve, you don't wake up in the morning dreading to go do the same thing day in and day out. There's always something new. There's always more to learn. And that, I think that makes me, I have a lot of interest in learning as much as I can, and I like those challenges. So I think that makes me a better investor every time I come across something that I didn't do before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, like today, even though I knew, I'm like, oh my God, today's going to be one of those days, but that's okay. It's fun. I think it's fun. It's fun to get up in the morning and try calling somebody, and you don't know if they're going to be mean or rude to you, or if they're going to be really helpful. You don't know if the seller's really going to, come through and actually do what he said he was going to do. And it's all of this, trying to kind of coordinate, and people in and out of the office, getting keys to a property, all of this. It's just fun. I think it's a lot of fun. And yes, to your point, you do learn every single time. There is something that you learn.
Yeah. So if you're new or you're interested in this industry, you know, this talk today is something to keep in mind. Something to think about is, what do you want your niche to be? And where do you want your areas of expertise to be? What kinds of things do you want to learn in terms of problem solving that you think will be really beneficial to your business? And it can take a little while. Don't think that you have to
Yeah.
know that coming in.
Mhm.
You know, everybody takes a little bit of time to find their niche and to see what really works well for them, and where they get good results, because that's going to be a little bit different for everyone. But it's certainly something
Yeah.
to consider, and it's something to keep in mind when you're building your business. How can you be the most beneficial to potential sellers? Because that is what is going to get people to be interested with working with you. Because when someone is in trouble, or someone has a situation that they need to solve, they're going to be focused on what's in it for me. How does this best work out in my interest? And if you can figure out how to make that happen, then you know you've got a leg up on your competition.
Yeah, absolutely. You do. You start to really kind of, and I think inherently you know what you're, if you're going into this business, you know what you're good at,
Yeah,
what skills you bring to the game. So Lisa's right, you do. It takes a little bit of time, but I think the biggest thing is just ask questions and don't be shy about it. Like if you don't know something, ask. I mean, more than likely an investor or somebody within the industry is going to be able to tell you at length, what you're asking, or the questions, answer the questions that you have. Because I think I learned, I was really, really quiet at the beginning, where I didn't really say much and I didn't really ask much, and then I would try to figure it out on my own. Yeah, that's not a good, no, don't do that. It's just better to ask and follow somebody. Like I said before, somebody has done it already. You might as well just, follow along with what somebody else has done. And you add your flair to it, and then you'll start building your own clientele for sure.
100%. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming in and being with us today on a Friday afternoon of a holiday weekend. We appreciate it.
Yes.
And we will be back on Monday with a new episode and some new, fresh information for you. And if you didn't catch this live, I see that somebody just joined us for a minute here at the end. If you weren't able to catch us live, this will be up on our page for the replay. So go ahead and watch at your leisure. All right?
Yes, definitely. And everybody, please have a safe weekend out there.
Absolutely.
Yes. And stay healthy. Yeah.
Be safe, stay healthy, take care. We'll see everybody on Monday.
See you Monday. Bye.
Bye.